They're crazy.
All right, this is us. Welcome everybody to the work session. Welcome Andrew Moore, Mayor of the town of Erie. It's delightful to have you here.
Yes.
So, Mr. Randall.
As the board knows, 2 weeks ago, we started our discussions about various options regarding the provision of library services to Superior residents. We laid out a list of what staff thought were the realistic options. There were 5 of them. Continue our relationship with the City of Louisville, pursue other prospective governmental partnerships, pursue the creation of a regional library authority, whether it was county-wide or the areas of the county that are not presently served, establishing our own facility with a number of variables, and the last one, which I don't think anybody thought was a very desirable option, and that is not providing library services. As a continuation of that discussion, we've invited Mayor Moore from Erie to come and talk about their recent experiences, and the second part of the discussion was that the board had asked for a couple of economic pro forma to identify what Superior could expect its operational costs to be if we were to get into some sort of our own facility. So I've given you a couple of pro forma, which were the biggest variable was the hours of operation. There really wasn't much of a variable when it came to the size of the facility, but I've given you a little bit on the capital side as well as the operational expenses, and hope it was at least helpful for you as you consider these alternatives. But I think you wanted to hear from Mayor Moore first.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. You know, maybe wherever you'd like, I don't know if it's easier to sit and speak from there or from the podium, whatever is convenient for you.
The dialogue, that might be okay, if you guys are okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, very good. Well, Your Honor and trustees, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have about how Erie ultimately went forward and was successful in getting a 20,000 square foot library for residents. Maybe I'll start with a question to all of you. How many of you have been to Erie and have seen the facility that we actually have? So 2 of you, okay. It was an interesting journey.
No, you're perfect. You're not Kendra at the moment, so I thought maybe we could turn it upside down. So we did.
We definitely don't want to be doing that. Do you want me to just kind of do a brief history?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay, maybe I'll break it down into just 3 segments. Kind of the situation that Erie was in when we didn't have a library, what path we chose to take, and then ultimately what the outcome was of that path. You go back to 2004, and Erie had no library system. We were split between 2 different areas in Erie. One in Weld County, which was part of the Weld Library District. Those individuals had already voted themselves into that district many, many years ago, and they were getting very minimal library services from a bookmobile. Then you had the Boulder County side of Erie, and the 2 sides back in 2004 were roughly equal population. So we're talking probably around 13,000 people at that point in time, equally split between the two sides. It posed a dilemma because we were trying to leverage as much out of the Weld Library District as possible, but because only half of our residents were paying the tax, we didn't have much leverage. And so we looked at different options, and one of the options was to move forward and try to bring the Boulder County side of Erie into the Weld Library District. Sounds easy enough, but there are state laws that actually would prevent that from happening. We also didn't want to vote our residents in that weren't already paying the tax if there wasn't some type of guarantee that said we would get services beyond the bookmobile. So very complicated from that point forward. We were fortunate the Weld Library District was also kicking off a study on services in southwest Weld County, and that basically includes Erie, Dacono, Frederick, Firestone, Meade. It's everything up the I-25 corridor in that southern portion of Weld. Now it's interesting because all those communities I think of more as Weld County communities, and in all honesty, Erie, if you know where we're located, we're west of I-25. We really associate more with Louisville, Superior, Lafayette, and the pull of our people is definitely to this direction. That posed some problems because I knew I was going to go in and try to lobby for full library services for Erie, knowing that I only had half my people paying and with no guarantee of the future. Make a long story short, we spent, must have been 7 or 8 months in 2005 as part of a study group with the Weld Library District that included all those municipalities. At the end of the study, the decision was made for the library district to build I think it was a 40,000 square foot library in Firestone, and to build Erie a library if we could bring the taxpayers to the district. So that was the kind of the trigger point. It took a lot of energy, a lot of discussions to get there. Once we got there, we inked the deal with the library district contingent upon us getting into, or getting the state law changed and then sending it to the voters. Simultaneous with all of that, Lafayette chose to cut off services to the Erie folks. Now, there has been a lot of dialogue off and on between Lafayette and Erie. Erie residents, of course, were using the Lafayette Library. We were not paying into it. There were discussions about a $60,000 a year fee for us. The mayor, prior to myself, and the board at that time chose to not go down that path. $60,000 was determined to be too much money for the
We can
service
relate.
we're paying.
Yes.
As I'm watching what's happening here, there are so many parallels. When I came to office in April of 2004, the mayor of Lafayette and myself, we picked this topic back up, and I stressed with them that, yes, we'd be using your library, but there are benefits to their community for us using their library. Specifically, it was the King Soopers across the street from their library, and that if they allowed us to get access, there would be maybe not fully measurable benefits, but benefits. That came down to an agreement for $6,000 a year to use their library, and we basically had that agreement in place for a little over 12 months. It was probably 14, 16 months. It was in place and contingent upon us getting our own library services, which was then contingent on us getting the state law changed and actually getting it on the ballot. Okay, so many different pieces are moving. We've got the Weld Library District saying, hey, you're in if you can bring our taxpayers. We got Lafayette giving us a temporary agreement for $6,000 so our residents had full access. And then we took it to the state, and it took some energy and effort, but in the end we got a bill passed and signed by the governor that basically said if your residents vote themselves into this taxing district, that was okay, and the library district can then do what they felt was most appropriate. The vote passed by a pretty good margin in Erie, so that at that point we had the full crew, and the library district had the commitment to build us a library, which did open in January of 2008. So it's been open about a year and a half now. Part of the pressure on our citizens to vote yes was that agreement with Lafayette was expiring on January 1st, 2008. And so they knew if they didn't vote it in, they were going to lose those services. Bottom line is it took 2.5 years. It took a lot of personal commitment from myself and others in the town to make it happen. But I couldn't be happier with the end results. Yes, sir.
I was curious, when the library district agreed to build the library in Erie, did they seek an extra proportion of capital costs from the residents or the taxpayers of Erie, Boulder County to start that, to build that library?
Great question. There was no additional fee. And I think the way the library district looked at it was that half of Erie had been paying into the Weld Library District for so long, and there are two aspects to the property tax. There's a capital aspect, which expires in 2018, I'm forgetting what year, but it expires someplace out in the future. And then there's an operational component that runs into perpetuity. They did not come back to us and say, we need additional funds. Now, the town did donate the land, so there was some funding from the town, if you will, to jumpstart the process. As I've looked at many different library solutions, Boulder County, and trying to get a library district in Boulder County is certainly one that was floated out there for a long time before we got this deal done. I've become such a proponent for library districts because the reality of running a library on your own, it's an expensive proposition. Not only that, the materials that you have in a library, they tend to be more limited in a municipal function. The Weld Library District runs kind of a hub and spoke operation, and so I can go online. You can all check out mylibrary.us. That is the High Plains Library District website. They changed their name from Weld Library District to High Plains. That was a change after Boulder County started to get involved with them. You can go on there and search for books, videos, DVDs, audio. Check it out. You can see where the inventory is, which other branch they have, and they have branches all the way up to Greeley. Within 24 hours, they shuttle it down to your library. So if I were to go online tonight and request some type of material, there's a good chance it'll be there tomorrow afternoon. If it doesn't make it tomorrow afternoon, it certainly will be there the next day. And so just having the pure, I guess it's the ability to serve with greater materials turned out to be kind of a side benefit of this whole thing.
And Greeley's part of the High Plains District?
It is.
And can you tell us what the property taxes are for, if you happen to know off the top of your head?
You know, I might have it. It's not very much.
I think I worked it out based on what the librarian told me. Is it the 3.25 mils?
That sounds right.
3.249, and so that's about $114 if the house is valued at about $350K and $162 for a $500,000 house.
That sounds right. It's the capital is 1.2 mils, and it expires in 2018. And the operations is 1.49, and that's evergreen. It continues into perpetuity. Yeah, so the monthly tax on a $300,000 home is $6.47. So it's not a big tax.
And how many residents does it serve, do you know?
Overall, I don't know. It's a large number, though, because you've got Greeley in there, you've got the Tri-Towns, you've got Meade, you've got Erie. Erie has grown from a smaller community to, we're about 18,000 now. We will pass Louisville in the next probably year and a half, 2 years as far as population goes. And, you know, at the end of the day, the service that we're getting from the district is exceeded my expectations, and I think if you ask people out in that area, they would also concur with that. It really works well. When I was meeting with Lisa at our library, I brought up the topic that I would encourage you guys to go talk with the High Plains Library District and to see if they have energy to expand further. Certainly what has happened in Erie, I think they would say is a success as much as we would say it's a success.
And it's on that topic?
I was just, sorry, and it doesn't have to be contingent, we don't have to be,
Contiguous.
thank you very much.
Don't know, but we had to have a state law change to make it happen, and there's a good chance you may have to have a state law changed if there's some type of continuity issue. Those laws can be changed, and if there's anything I learned from that, if you start talking about putting books in kids' hands,
It's very popular.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
hard
It helps get the energy behind what you're trying to do.
And there may be it sounds like either, and going to the legislature wasn't, I mean, it wasn't fun, I mean, or short, but it wasn't impossible, and it wasn't, totally onerous, right?
No, but I will say that prior to my election, the prior mayor was trying to go the opposite route, and she was trying to get a bill through the House and Senate and signed that would have allowed the Weld County side of Erie to opt out of the district.
Oh.
Basically cutting off payments because they weren't getting services. It passed the House, it passed the Senate. The elections came, I became mayor. Second week on the job, I get a call from the governor saying, why should I sign this bill?
Hold everything.
He ended up vetoing the bill, which opened the door for us then to go the other route, which was the more inclusive route.
When I did call back, I had asked the mayor to talk to them, and then, anyway, when I spoke with the person there, it's possible, if they're, depending on how the maps work, maybe they hit Boulder County Unincorporated, or we hit Boulder County Unincorporated, maybe there's some way, but otherwise, it doesn't sound like the legal thing is that horrible. And we do have somebody on the executive board for CML, and maybe that can back in, and,
I would love to see Boulder County get access to a library district. The reality of it is library services cost money, and if you want them, there's a good argument to be made that everybody should be sharing in the cost. one of the reasons why this is, I think most would say is pretty inexpensive, is because it's spread across so many people. It includes most of the people in Weld County. Not all of them, but most of them. And I think if Boulder County can get that way, I think those municipalities that do not want to see others use their services, they would be happy because there would be another mechanism for those individuals to use facilities.
And I think that the problem with Boulder County getting its own system was that all the large players already have their own individual libraries, so they're not interested, of course, paying toward a county system. So this sort of thing may be another way to go.
You know, one of the other advantages of a library district really comes down to that critical mass again. The Erie Library did not shut at all this summer. It was open on Sundays, 7 days a week. And so when you think about your community and you're thinking about people relocating to your community, all of a sudden those little things become differentiators. You know, and those that own their own municipal libraries in this day and age just are not staying open. I think Louisville is now shut on Sundays during the summer. I think Lafayette shuts during the summer on Sundays. And, you know, what is the value? It's hard to say definitively, but certainly for some people there's value there.
I think you're preaching to the choir about the library district here. It's very difficult to retrofit this. You know, you'd have to have elections in Lafayette and Louisville and, you know, maybe the rest of Boulder County where people would say, you know, my property taxes are going to be neutral, but there's going to be a dedicated amount that's going to be going to the O&M of the library, and I think that's sometimes a tough sell.
Yeah, it absolutely would be. I would suggest going a slightly different route and saying that it's only those individuals in unincorporated Boulder County and any municipality that does not have library services that would want to opt in. That way you're not having to deal with those who are already paying library taxes. And you're basically creating a district that serves those who have no way to get library services today
The everybody
in an equitable way.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're thinking.
I think going down the road of trying to get Boulder and Lafayette and Louisville to opt into a district, I think would be tough. One, there's probably too many library facilities across them, and so there's going to be cuts somewhere in that type of model. But if you created a district that kind of flowed with those that aren't served today, and you basically have a South Boulder County branch that serves that population, you've solved a big problem out here.
Unfortunately, the South Boulder is us.
It's you guys, but it's also all the county residents between here
That are
and
north.
Longmont.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few county residents out there. It could be Lyons.
Problem is that people are, I don't know. Once again, I preach to the choir. I think the districts in general, rec districts, library districts, fire districts, all make sense because there's benefit to be gained by economies of scale. You know, people, I don't think will be driving past libraries to get to another library is the only downside. So
Yes.
people in unincorporated Boulder County aren't going to drive by the Louisville library and say, well, I'm going to come to Superior. That would be my guess, I guess.
But has Louisville, we don't have to get into the details of this, but at what point does Louisville basically say those people don't have access?
Well, they've done that
Like
before.
us, yeah.
They did it to us, they have not addressed any.
They haven't done the rest
We
of
were
the
singled
county.
out.
Oh, so they've only said
We were
that
singled out.
Superior residents can't, but other county residents can?
Yep.
That's where they went.
That's an interesting political decision.
We thought so.
We thought so.
I didn't know that.
It has some legal overtones, too.
That's very diplomatically put.
So. Other questions?
So the library is a really nice facility also, right? And very open and very children-friendly and
I would encourage you all, if you want to get a sense for what a 20,000 square foot library
Yeah.
looks like and feels like, because it's not huge, but it's also not small. And just to go in there and walk around, get a sense for it. There's a fireplace and a sitting area over by the magazines. It's really nice. The kids' room is separate, shaped like a kite, and the kids go in there and have their reading sessions. It really does show you what you can get for not a huge facility. but certainly will serve our population into the probably 30 and 40,000 range as we.
And do you have meeting rooms?
There's
Yes.
one public meeting room in there. Now, right next door to it is our community center, and if you haven't been in our community center, it is 65,000 square feet, state-of-the-art. It's a full community center, and big enough to have weddings and the whole 9 yards. So between those two facilities, there's definitely places to meet within here.
And again, it's not a huge contribution by each of your members, or each of your residents because of the library district thing.
Exactly. That's the bottom line. If we were to take this on just with the Erie population, I don't know what the number would be, but it would certainly be more than
A
what we have
multiple,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the Firestone branch, which is one of their hubs, much bigger, but it has a similar feel to it. Now, when I say much bigger, what bigger means is they just have more books there. They have more DVDs there. Do they necessarily have a lot more different titles or just more of the same title? It's probably a little of both. But it makes that ability to check out a book from one of the other branches, Firestone included, so easy because it's so close.
And you have 24-hour turnaround, is that right,
Roughly 24 hours.
for ordering a book?
Yeah. Erie is only about 10 miles from where we're sitting here tonight. I think sometimes people feel like it's way out there.
Some on the plane.
Yeah, it's way out east somewhere. But the reality, it's 10 miles due east of Boulder, down Arapahoe, and you hit Erie, and then the library's another mile and a half into the core of our town. And so, when I think geographically, there's branches much further from the Erie in the Weld Library District than something this part. So logistically, I just can't see a reason why it wouldn't work from that perspective. It's a political discussion. Energy, a little bit of courage and focus, I think can get things done. I'm happy to stay involved if you think I can help with making connections with the representatives that helped us get to where we are. Janine Reed is the director from the Library District. I think, Lisa, you've spoken with Janine. Janine is energetic. She wants to get her services where they're needed. Whether this is one step too far, I don't know, but I would encourage you to chat with her.
She seemed more opportunity, or more like open as opposed to barriers. She wasn't looking for all the negatives. She was kind of saying, oh, something like that,
Yeah.
which is always positive.
Well, don't hesitate to send me emails or give me a call if anything else comes up. And
Thanks a lot. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much.
Okay.
Pursue it.
Yeah.
I will. Nice seeing you.
See you guys.
Thanks so much.
What's that?
The Andrew name for mayor.
It's a requirement anymore.
gonna be-
You have to have it, Andrew.
Yeah.
Well, we need an Andrew Carnegie, is what we need.
That's what we need for libraries. Exactly right.
Nicely put, yeah.
Next steps, as I said, I've given you the economics associated with what we thought from a staff perspective were a couple of scenarios for operating a facility. I purposely left the capital side more blank, depending on whether it was a storefront with a lease obligation, whether it was a new build with a debt obligation. But absent that, you saw what the numbers were. And I hope that the footnotes kind of helped. I went on the cheap. Specifically, you'll notice probably the most significant one was the omission of the Flatirons Library Consortium, which is the Boulder, Louisville, Broomfield. We've been using estimates based on the discussions that took place at your last referendum in 2006 of a $25,000 to $50,000 nut to join that consortium. The statewide consortium is available to us at $4,000 a year. We thought that may not guarantee you 24-hour turnaround. Your books might be coming from somewhere a little bit further away, but it does include a courier service that you have access and reciprocity. You give and you get from anywhere within the state.
It was interesting to hear that basically their O&M cost was the same as what we've estimated for, well, not estimated,
The
but that's...
149?
149 is a 1.5, essentially, and which is what we were proposing to go to ballot for. So I guess it depends on how important it is for people to have a, and this is just a philosophical discussion, how important is it to have a structure in the town of Superior where we have to have a capital construction cost? I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to that question. Some people feel that the library in Louisville is close enough and don't build anymore, and some people feel it's too far away. So, and once again, that's more of a personal decision than anything else.
Well, and I think one other question is what would be long-term costs there? If I don't know if we have a guarantee.
I think so.
Yeah, I think the IGA is 1.5, whatever that is.
Life.
Unless there's an opt-out, of course.
With
So
a
nothing's for life.
180-day opt-out.
Yeah, but it's, the way it's written is 1.5. So we don't know what the number is because we don't know what 1.5 is.
Well, I think it's also interesting that, residents knew that this was something that their temporary $6,000 for the library, their services were going to end.
Right.
One way or the other, it was going to end if they didn't do something, and I think that's something that would be important to get out. That it's not that you're just saying, do you want something in Superior? It's kind of,
Do you want anything?
do you want it? Yeah, exactly.
I guess my thinking right now, and maybe I'm not seeing a different vision, but to me, it's not an either or. Because we have the ballot issue coming up. I don't know whether we could do all the groundwork to get a library district kind of ballot up in time. But we have continuing the IGA coming up or doing something different. But we don't have to decide to do something different at the same time that we decide to continue the IGA for however long it might take us to figure out something more. If we wanted to be part of a district like High Plains. I personally like that option better than, going to a storefront operation. In the interim, that would probably cost about the same. I think the IGA is very good right now, but that's where my head's at right now.
I guess the near term I'm flexible on, but I think we could go to the ballot with a plan, which would be that for, X number of years, we would be in the library system in Louisville, and after that point, our plan would be to do the library district thing. So people would be voting for a plan that would be part Louisville and part change.
I think that confuses the ballot a lot.
I don't think you can do that. I don't know, I think
it would be difficult.
I think
I was
we
trying to
can
say
vote
kind of one issue
I
question.
know, but I think you can vote for the plan. A plan is one issue.
But what are they voting for, though?
Yeah, we have to ask, I don't know. There might be some hurdles there, but that would certainly be kind of hard to communicate. We wouldn't be able to get enough assurances about a district and put all the details in place.
I think we'd be in the same situation as Erie was, which was this contingent on this and getting a law changed and things like that. And I think that's doable, and I think it seems to fit in with the sort of whole town center plan more than the alternative.
Do we know that we have to get the law changed, though?
No, we don't know that.
It's ambiguous, right now?
So maybe, can you repeat what you proposed, Lisa? Maybe I missed it.
That we would develop a library plan. And our library plan might have been a storefront for a few years, it might be instead being in Louisville a few years. I think there are advantages to each. And that the plan is that we will be, trying to, or lobbying to get a law change. Maybe, I don't know how far we can get on that this year. I have no idea. There's legislative agendas being put together right now, so it could be on the legislation this next year, hard to say, if we need it. And the plan would be to try to join the High Plains District, and we know approximately what the cost is for that, and it's a pretty affordable per household cost.
But the analogy is that, I think Mayor Moore said that, they didn't have to pay additional capital expenses because they have been paying all along. I would think the analogy would be that we'd be paying the 3.5 or
Yes.
whatever it was. And if you ask people, it's 3.5 for you to be a part of a district and build a building here.
3.5
How does that-
for so many years, and then back down to 1.5 after so
Correct.
many years.
Or are people happy with
10
just...
years or something.
Yeah, are people happy with the 1.5 permanently without having to build a building here? So that would be a question.
The fundamental, gets back to the fundamental question, do we want to continue with the IGA, or do we want to have a vote on putting something of our own in? Or do we want to have that second vote right away, or do we want to study or see if the opportunity arises and not address it at this point?
And I guess it's hard to say because I saw, both from citizens directly, but also citizens, input on the web and whatever. There was a lot of dissatisfaction with the whole Louisville thing for many reasons. And I thought it was part of our long-term town center plan, so perhaps I'm
Well, the town center could be,
Could be whatever.
yeah.
what do you mean? What could be whatever?
You could, well, we don't have a library, obviously, in town center plans right now, so that could be added as a public amenity.
And we could also vote down the tax at some point in the future, which I'm sure residents would love to do. It's not a tax that you keep forever, you can vote it down. If we go to vote and it passes to continue the IGA with Louisville, you can get rid of it later. I mean, I'm certainly open to talking with High Plains Library District and seeing if there are any opportunities there. I think that would be great.
So, next steps would be to figure out whether or not we can do that
Sure.
at all with High Plains District.
I guess.
Might change how if it's going to be an uphill battle and really difficult, it might change how we think about it. If it's something that we don't have to change any laws. We need to.
And I don't think that, and I'm assuming we're still going to ballot in April, unless people feel differently about that.
I think we're obligated to go to bed
we have to
one way or
one way or the
another.
Well, we're obligated if we want to have library services.
Yeah, we don't have to go back.
I guess that was the jump that I was making, is that we want to provide library services, and that's the way to do it, so.
Yeah,
I'm assuming that's still the case.
I think we should live up to our commitments.
Yeah, that would be my perspective as well.
I'm not opposed to finding out more information, because, the key issue is, do we really want a facility here, and are we willing to pay for it, to have it here, and how soon? And is this ballot issue the time to bring that to a head?
And for me, I think I think Louisville has a nice library. I think we don't have as much control over it as I would like if we were going to be investing serious money. And I really don't like the fact that kids can't walk there. So, they can't walk, they can't bike, they can't get there except by parents shuttling.
And I don't want to be too negative, but, I feel like I'm being the negative person tonight, but, as a parent, I don't think that kids will be walking to the town center either.
You don't?
No. I mean,
I
take a poll.
totally did. I mean, with it,
Yeah, life has changed a little bit, so, kids are shuttled everywhere to do anything, so. I don't know, that's my perspective. I don't know how other people feel, but I suspect if you had to go to a commercial area where the library was, that,
If the
vast
library were
majority
at the Safeway complex, they'd walk maybe,
yeah.
Or bike.
Or bike.
but I'm not sure
Teenagers
about
would.
the town center.
So it just depends
I
on
know
which
people that bike to Louisville.
kids you're talking about, I suppose.
But
Yeah.
kids by themselves.
High school kids can do it, maybe.
We'll know which area.
When they're not driving.
When they're in. I tend to agree with Joe. I think it comes down to whether or not we want to offer an alternative ballot measure to build something here, and that's where it makes sense to try and do something with High Plains.
Yes.
So I think we should explore that a little bit more, see if it's feasible, and then make a decision around the second ballot initiative to see if voters have a preference, or none of the above.
And it could get to the point, when and if the town center comes to fruition, which doesn't appear to be coming to fruition anytime soon, but, it could be part of the urban renewal public amenity that we could build a building then without actually having a property tax
Right.
for capital construction.
And I'm not nuts about having a library of our own without being hooked into a serious library district in
Yeah,
a serious
that
way.
seems
So I
like-
think that's why we weren't kind of
Yeah.
looking back to what we got here in a package, so I'm just trying to say.
No, I think that absolutely makes sense, to not be an individual.
Yes.
I don't want to be another Louisville library,
I
or with a little.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. I would consider
We're all like-
Louisville Superior Library District, if that makes
Right.
sense.
It seems like that's the most straightforward, at least from my perspective. Is that they pay 1.5, I think, for, I don't remember what their ballot is, but they actually might pay 1.5 for capital construction, and
They don't have
and they
enough
pay out
money.
of, and they pay the rest of it out of general revenue. I could see, however, that they might convert that to, you can see the Tabor question, without raising property taxes, are you willing to convert your O&M, your capital construction costs to the O&M and have that in perpetuity? And we'd have the same 1.5.
Yeah.
And so, de facto, then you have a district. So finishing the next step, so finding out whether or not we can do that, whether or not there's contiguity issues, whether or not they're interested in us being there. I'm sort of running out of...
High Plains, is it a viable option in terms of
Right.
the legalities, as
And
well as
If
buy-in,
it's not, how hard would it be to change?
as well as the buy-in and operating costs? The City of Louisville, in prospect of a different model.
We don't get a building.
We don't want.
We don't get a building
Why?
if we do it in Louisville.
Why?
I'm just saying, at the 1.5 or whatever, I mean, if we join with Louisville, do you see it coming up with a building in Superior? I don't. If it becomes the Louisville
Depends
Superior
on what you
Library
want.
District.
Yes, you could do a 2,500, 5,000 square foot storefront with a lease, with the amenities that we talked about, and an operating budget, and operate and do it for $250,000 a year.
I heard only me being at all in favor of storefronts on this board. Am I wrong? I heard no.
I'm confused by
Yeah.
what just happened here, so.
Me too. My vision of a storefront.
I'm taking the next steps.
Yeah.
And which
Well, I
was
understand
to
that. I
approach
just-
library,
yeah.
to approach Louisville was one of the next steps. But to
About
approach
what?
Louisville does not mean that a Superior facility is off the board, based on the economics that you've just seen.
What do you mean, approach Louisville, how?
A different model, not as a subcontractor, but as a district.
Oh, I understand, right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right, so we've got the current
With joint
idea.
governance, with joint
Right.
ownership, with joint facilities, with,
Right.
and hopefully some economies of scale associated with one rather than two independents. If that was one of the
it's a neat proposal, yes. That is
Yeah, so it's kind of like a third option.
Too much.
Yeah.
They can all join together.
But they're completely different systems.
Why would they do it?
Completely incompatible. Computer systems don't talk at all.
No, I would
And it's
find that
hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not,
It's worth asking Malcolm when he...
it's fine, you do computer systems.
It doesn't hurt.
So 3 options? Is that what I'm hearing?
So those are the things, as far as I can tell, those are the pieces of information we need
Yes.
to make an informed decision about where to go. And once again, we're still planning on the April election to continue library services with Louisville Library.
Very good.
Okay? Thank you. That was a good discussion, I thought. Let's see, we actually finished the rest of our work session, which is quite unusual. So, review of the tentative September 14th agenda items.
An incredible lengthy list. In fact, the
Yes.
only action item that we had based on our earlier discussions were the Home Rule Task Force, based on some chatter I was hearing today. I don't know that the mayor's letters have had much, have stimulated much interest.
I didn't get a lot of positive feedback about home rule. I did get a couple of responses from previous board members who would be interested in, but they also thought maybe the timing wasn't right.
Okay. It is included in the September issue of the newsletter, which hits the mailboxes this weekend. So,
My perspective on that, as I was thinking about, is probably the educational campaign, I think, is still important. So even if we're not going to go to home rule in April or whenever, just so that, I got the feeling that home rule was thought by many to be a sneaky way for the town board to gain more power. That was sort of the
Raise taxes.
raise taxes, whatever, yeah.
It could be exactly the opposite.
Certainly could be the case, but I think it would be important just for people to have an idea of what home rule really was. So I think the education campaign is, I think, still fruitful.
and the task force was one of them.
Could end up as
Are you recommending that we don't do the task force?
What's that?
Are you recommending that we don't do a task force?
I think it would make sense to do the task force if we were committed to going to an election in April. I'm not optimistic about that at the moment.
Yeah, I think, the way I look at it is it would be really valuable to get some analysis, kind of material on record from people other than the board on what the issues are. Pros and cons, whatever. And hopefully a fairly balanced view. So that material is available, right? Part of the education campaign. So I don't see it as if we're committed to trying to push this, we should do a task force. I think we should do a task force as part of the education, regardless.
Regardless, exactly.
Then would
So-
we call it something other than a task force, like an advisory committee or something?
Yeah,
Because does a task force mean something about the first
might
step of
do
the
something.
home rule?
unless the law requires us to call it a task force, I don't really care what it's called. I think it would just be great to have people who are not on the board look at this a little more closely, because there's, opinions aside, some people are for, some people are against. I think there's a lot of misinformation. So that's what I
Yes.
care most about clearing up.
I guess,
I'm not getting the sense that there's a lot of people who care about this, because there's a lot of people who just don't care what happens in this town. Right? So it seems. Or they trust us so much that they don't see the need to be involved. But having just some material, starting the conversation now, regardless of when it happens, I think it's valuable to have other people outside the board talk about it.
let me ask a question I should know the answer to probably. Did at the last meeting, but then several weeks have passed and I'm over 60. If we start a task force, are we committed to going to election with something that
No,
will come
that's what I was
No way.
wondering.
Not necessarily.
To target the game plan, there was like a 8-10-point educational program, and one of the points, as Trustee Rosenfeld just mentioned, was to get an independent analysis. The task force was intended to be non-town
Elected.
residents, non-elected officials, but town residents to independently review this over the course of September, October, November, and to render a report to the board in December, recognizing that the board would have to make a decision if they wanted to proceed by the first meeting in January. That was the game plan. That was one of the elements.
Is that element also a charter proposed?
No,
Okay.
No, you have to go to election to do the charter.
absolutely not. This was merits and demerits. But to have an independent set, go off and tell us what you think. That was the premise. The Speakers Bureau and the newsletter articles and all of the other things that we laid out as part of the educational component. If there's a reluctance to proceed, we can nip it. But I don't know that we've even started to educate. I don't know that we've started the education process yet. And while there might be chatter,
I guess what I was hearing you say was not so much the quote education process, but actually some advice back and forth on what it would mean and why we would consider going forward. But maybe I've misinterpreted what this task force might do.
That's it exactly.
This advisory committee might do.
the board would be appointing, we didn't pick the exact number, we're suggesting 7 to 9, I believe. I'm going back about a month, and I don't necessarily have the best recall either.
With the lower numbers, yes.
The board appointing a group of individuals that they wanted to entrust to independently review the merits and demerits of the issue, and to report back before the board has to make its decision.
And I guess the part that was confusing me was part of an education and so many step thing, which assumes we're moving forward, and that's the part I was assuming this would be a potentially just that's it and it goes no further.
The board adopted an 8 or 10-point plan that said we're going to do the next, these tasks between September 1st and December 1st. And we started it. We've already written the newsletter again, which hits the mailboxes. If you want us to undo it, tell me. But based on the guidance that you've given us, we're doing the stuff that you've asked to do. Creating the Speakers Bureau and all of those things.
Well, I continue to favor the education campaign. I'm, once again, somewhat ambivalent about the task force at the moment, just given reactions I've had from... I had a very strongly negative reaction to one person that was invited, so that didn't seem to be the starting point. So...
And I guess I was the other way around. I would, and I'm not trying to undo anything that was done. I'm just saying that for me, I'm more interested in hearing what a committee that's independent might come up with, and I wouldn't want to go with an education campaign if we weren't going to move forward from whatever that, from in a positive way out of what comes out of that discussion. So for me, it seems like education broadly is the cart before the horse. If we don't know what the positives and negatives are independently, then what will we be educating about? So.
Just the general concepts of what home rule is. And
Again.
Trustee Rosenfeld brought up, Eric, you brought up the thought about having a survey. Maybe it would make, maybe it makes sense. I mean, this kills me because I can see the importance of home rule for so many different reasons. But that's because we've all been working here on the board and sort of know this, and most people, one, have no idea what home rule is to begin with, whether or not we're home rule or not, and what are the benefits. And it seems to me that broad community education about what home rule is makes sense, just in general, and that it'd be an organic growth over time about interest in the home rule discussion, and then maybe a survey after some broad-based educational campaign and kind of get a flavor of where we're at.
I think the one thing that I've noticed when I talk to people about home rule is just that most people assume that it's the exception, that most towns are not home rule.
Right.
And really, it's the opposite. In most
They're very
towns,
surprised when you tell them actually we're the exception.
yeah, that most places
Right.
are home
Yeah.
rule in Colorado. So,
Including all our neighbors.
including all our neighbors, right? So, even the stats are important piece to be out there.
So I would continue with the education campaign, and we can continue outreach to find task force members that
We may not have anybody that steps to the plate interested in serving in this capacity, but we put the call out. I think the deadline was, don't hold me, September 6th or 7th, to give us a week in which to review their credentials, with the intent that the board would appoint a committee at their first meeting in September.
How many responses have you had?
I've had 4. One
And again, the newsletter hasn't even hit the street.
Okay,
The
yeah.
newsletter hits the mailboxes this weekend.
One strongly opposed, and 3 that would be interested. Well, 2 that would be very interested, and 1 that was, well, if it's not going anywhere, don't want to spend a whole bunch of time talking about it.
See, that's a nice mix.
Yeah, there you go. Just can't get the person who's not interested to probably do it.
There are a couple potential other items. We will at some point, whether it's at the next meeting or the following meeting, have a change order for based on changing quantities for asphalt and concrete spot repair throughout the community. That was the contract that you approved with Brown Brothers for roughly $240,000. Now that we finally have all of the concrete curb and potholes filled, I am anticipating that there will be a change order out of the contingency allowance that will probably exceed my financial authority. There's a possibility that we could have something coming back based on some of our executive session discussions regarding real estate. Those are in constant state of flux. I've tried to keep you abreast of those on sidebar conversations, but it's conceivable that we could have a lengthier agenda than just the 2 items that are before you tonight.
Thanks.
The digest, very briefly.
Yep.
The school signs at the request were recently relocated in front of Superior Elementary. They're going to be relocated again, and the Traffic Safety Committee earlier this evening endorsed this recommendation that we also move the flashing school speed sign also to the south side of the El Dorado intersection. That'll be done in the next couple of weeks at a cost of roughly $1,000. A couple of items regarding budget. You did receive information regarding sales tax, vehicle use tax, building permits. Not a significant change from where we have been. June receipts were down just under 2%. We are right between 2 and 2.5% down for the year, which is where we expected to be back in March. Vehicle use tax actually increased over the course of the last month, whether that's cash for clunkers or pent-up demand. But vehicle use tax was up 2.7% for the year. We're still down 13%. We were anticipating about 15%, so we continue to watch with interest at that number every month. Building permits, as I indicated, we're still down for the year 63% compared to the prior year. Yet a month ago, we were down almost 80%, so it was trending positively. That doesn't have a big impact in terms of the town's revenues because the building permit revenue received, we split 70-30. But it is an indicator of building use tax and just other kinds of economic activity within the community, so we do track it very, very closely. That's all I have from the digest. If the board has any questions. No. Enjoy a couple minutes.
Great. Thanks. A couple minutes before the meeting starts. like to call to order a regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for August 24th, 2009. And Phyllis, if you would call the roll.
Okay. Mayor Andrew Buckle,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lisa Stevens.
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli.
Here.
Dana D'Souza.
Here.
Elia Gregoris.
Here.
Eric Rosenfeld.
Present.
Deborah Williams. Town Manager Scott Randall.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Harden here.
Trustee Williams sends her regrets that she couldn't get here. She had a family issue she had to deal with, so she won't be here this evening. Item number 2, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I entertain the motion to approve the agenda by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee Gregoris. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 4, presentations. We don't have any tonight. And item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. Welcome, George.
Hey, Board, George Kepler, 109 South Fourth. I have just a couple of questions. When are we going to complete the Town 9 sidewalks up there? It seems like we're dragging, and are off more than they're on the job. I live here, I see it day in and day out.
Okay.
I just like knowing what their date is for completion.
Don't know, and once again, I'd love to talk to you about that. I'm sure people from staff would be happy to talk to you. I just don't have that information at the meeting.
And the same way with the striping, when we're going to stripe the streets over here. The town's out on their neck there, I'm telling you. If you don't have this circle around there, you go around there with a 60-foot trailer, and you sideswipe a car over there, and there's no lines, you know who's responsible. The town cannot have lines on it. And I'm just telling you, been asking you to get it done. Please.
Which place are you talking about?
Talking about the intersection over here at Marshall Road and McCaslin.
Thank you.
Coming down Marshall.
I understand.
And there are water wagons that come from all those springs down there 2 or 3 times a week or 4. I see them going down through it. And they got to have a guideline with those trailers to keep them out of there in the path of them cars. Because if you don't have nothing, you know who's going to be responsible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell them thank you.
Right, thanks. Additional public comment? Welcome, Bob.
I'm Bob McCool, 312 West Coal Creek Drive. I have 3 things. Regarding home rule, the Superior Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors had a retreat today. This topic did come up. There is tremendous interest in the Chamber Board in this topic, and so, Scott, I wanted to just ask you if you would maybe get in touch with Heather and the board. There are a couple of us who are interested in education for the businesses, and I would suspect maybe some interest in helping on the task force.
Okay, great.
I also want to talk about the Town 9 for a different reason. Just in the involvement I have with different committees, I know that there's discussion of another park in another part of the town. And what I want to bring to the board is ask you not to lose sight of the Town 9. So I'm watching I know ProStack is looking at potential park options. And the Town 9, great things are happening. Really appreciate the sidewalks going around. But as I looked at the budget that the Parks Department was proposing for parks going forward, and I know these are just proposed numbers, but the budget seems to phase right off the Town 9. Little is looking at it doesn't look like much is being spent on the Town 9 in the next 3 or 4 years. And although I don't think we have a big interest in a lot of amenities, but to get that park sort of finished up, and the grass is getting in there, the trails are getting around. We've got some trees planted up around the field. There's still no trees or anything. There were even no trees planted around the park itself where the kids play. It's just wide open. And so I'd like to ask the board to just ask ProStack to just keep on that and just kind of keep moving forward each year to kind of get that park finished, and so that we have a really nice place down here eventually. And then,
Mr. Humble, maybe you could I suspect that there's much interest in the board level. Maybe you could pass it along to ProStack next time you might run into somebody.
Oh, I do run into them. I bring it up, so I make it public. So that's happening too. So, some of them. And then the last thing, just again, I bring this up every once in a while, and it's pedestrian safety on this end of town. We still have crosswalks over here at 4th going over the marketplace that are, the stripes are, they're faded, but they're kept up sort of. But the signage down here compared to what I see in Rock Creek just isn't the same. There aren't signs up there saying that you've got pedestrians crossing across 76th Street or across Sycamore over to the marketplace. And I know there's a pedestrian safety committee out there somewhere, and would love to see a little bit of attention. See a little bit of attention put down here with regards to some signage, because people don't really stop when you're in that marketplace area. So. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Maybe I could pass it along to the Transportation and Safety Committee, maybe they could give us a recommendation.
Put that on our next meeting agenda.
Great, thanks. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items? Okay. Seeing none, item number 6, consent agenda, and on tonight's consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the August 10th, 2009 meeting, acceptance of the minutes of the Planning Commission meetings, approval of a liquor license renewal for Rock Creek Wine and Spirits, approval of a liquor license renewal for the Target Corporation, and approval of a resolution appointing a member to the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Advisory Committee, with Mr. Tan filled in that blank. So, motion by Trustee Skumas to approve the consent agenda, second by Trustee Rosenfeld. Discussion? Trustee Skumas?
Just there's one typo, and something should be 6C instead of 6D, but I can explain that to you.
Okay, great. Additional comment? Let's see, not spending any money. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 7, reports, questions, and issues. Ms. Carberry, I don't know if you want to start out this evening?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Mr. Randall?
2 items. First, I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce to the board our new Director of Public Works and Utilities, Kurt Kauer. Kurt attended the Transportation Safety Committee meeting earlier this evening. A couple of the board members said, "You look familiar." It was because he was before you about a month or 6 weeks ago when ProStack was presenting their Community Park East plan. As you know, Kurt joins us from RG Engineering, and before that, where he served with distinction with the City of North Glen for many, many years. So Kurt has been with us for a little over a week, and excited to have him here. And he's hit the ground running on top of the roundabout, on top of the paving program. I'm really pleased. And I'm sure he'll have an answer for me by 9 o'clock staff meeting on when we expect the Town 9 sidewalk to be completed.
Maybe he can just step to the podium quickly so we can all get his face on TV.
Just to put you out in the public there.
And welcome aboard. And Mr. Randall, usually we hire from the pipeline from Thornton, so how's that North Glen guy?
Close enough.
We're shaking things. We're shaking things up.
There you go.
Not doing things the way we've always done them.
I'm excited to work with the board and the community.
Great. Great. Thanks very much.
September 1st for the sidewalk.
Oh,
There you go.
look at that, on top of the ball.
Excellent.
Positive was your answer.
The second point that I had was that I will not be in attendance at the next meeting. Matt will be filling in for me on the 14th. Has nothing to do with the length or breadth of the agenda. We'll get whatever stuff is on. And a reminder that you have, because of the off Monday night, you have 3 weeks between meetings. And we do have the beginning of the budget review next Monday night, starting at 6 o'clock in the council chambers for the Finance Committee and anybody else that's interested in attending.
Would you like to know who's interested in attending ahead of time? Or do you want to just show up? I'm planning to attend.
Just show up, it's noticed.
Okay. Anything else? Ms. Harden, anything from you?
Mr. Randall just took mine.
There you go. All right. Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Mrs. Sorelli, anything from you?
Let's see, town attorney was supposed to report on this rather than I. But the planning commission did meet again on chapter 16.
Okay.
And we were given a summary by the town manager on that they are going to be proceeding. Town attorney was at the meeting and I just sat in the audience, but they worked out what we all think is a method for going forward, and So have some high hopes on that. It's been a difficult project, and I appreciate their tenacity in sticking to it.
That is very good news.
Yeah, it is. And we did have a Transportation and Safety Committee meeting beforehand, which I'll let the other board members.
So I don't pass it
I was
along to
hoping since you started that way that you would...
Well, slowing down here. I'll fill you in on that, but, and third, and I do not expect to be at the next meeting. I expect to be out of town on the 14th.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Rosenfeld?
I don't have anything.
Trustee Squimans?
I have something direct and I guess indirect. So, okay, so
Intriguing.
yeah. So I'm our CML representative and CML Executive Board, and on the CML Executive Board I got named to be the representative on a task force for the electronics waste for the state. So there was a bill that passed that said there'll be an electronics task force, and it will come up with legislation. I just spent all day today hearing from, thank you for those who filled out the e-waste survey, and so I gave the report on what cities liked, and cities thought counties should do most of it, because towns don't really have that much authority, or haven't traditionally taken on that much authority in solid waste, rather counties have. And it was an interesting meeting with representatives from lots of stakeholders, including manufacturers and retailers and haulers and so on. So we have a couple more meetings scheduled, and we'll see what comes out. Models from a lot of different states are being considered, but it will be interesting to see what has legs in this state.
Great.
Will you have any results from the surveys?
Sure, I can send you them.
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
And that was the indirect or the direct?
That was.
Or is the combo?
It's indirect because I have to go through 3 steps to get there.
Got it. Let's see, a couple things for me. I attended the final environmental impact statement celebration last week for US 36. It was fun to attend. Congressman Perlmutter and Paulus were there, and the other congressmen sent representatives. Hopefully things will happen on the corridor. Nobody was very optimistic about finding money for additional things to happen. So, but it's a step in the right direction. The next step would be the record of decision, and hopefully that would be towards the end of this year. But wait to see. Had intriguing CAC discussions over the last few days, revolving around different things: home rule, wards. Election timing, this, that, and the other thing. So it was, I think it was helpful. Some people get a little hot under the collar because they feel passionate about issues, and that's understandable. Good that people feel passionate about issues. But I did have one question of the attorney. So there was some issue about moving elections to November, and my recollection, which certainly could be incorrect, was that I thought that required a home rule, but perhaps that doesn't.
It's a more complicated answer. There's a statute that allows a statutory town to move its election to November. However, that statute was written prior to Tabor. The problem when Tabor was drafted, Tabor being the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which requires a vote for any tax increase. When Tabor was adopted, Tabor says that the elections must occur on the first Tuesday in November. The statute says that a statutory municipality may move its election to the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November. It's very confusing, but that's how it all used to be. That's how the election code used to be. That's how all the home rule charters used to be, the first Tuesday following the first Monday. Well, the drafters of Tabor didn't do such a good job. They left out the first Monday part. So what happened was every home rule municipality changed theirs to match Tabor because we have no choice. So all the home rules amended their charters and said the first Tuesday in November. The problem is that municipal election code provision 3110-109 that you referred to in the email was never changed. So it does allow us to move our elections in November. The simple answer is yes, we can move our elections to November. The problem is, in 2011, the first example, the first Tuesday in November is November 1st. The first Tuesday following the first Monday in November is November 8th. So we would be allowed to move our election to November 1st. The county would have to November 8th, excuse me. The county would have their election November 1st. We would not be allowed to coordinate. So, while the technical answer is yes, a statutory town can move its election to November, a statutory town cannot move its election to the first Tuesday in November. So, yeah, that's a really long answer, but it's longer than the one I had given you via email, but that's the longer answer. So, the short answer to the question is yes, we can move our election to November.
So in order to, the upside is, there's nothing magic about November, right?
Right.
The only thing about November is that we have coordinated elections in November,
Right.
which the mayor's interest in this particular issue is that we increase voter turnout from 400 some odd. I was reading CIC things from 2007 or whenever it was, saying how bad the turnout was and what a shame it was because the turnout was 400 something or other. And Ms. Harden, I don't know, what was November's turnout? Do you have kind of a Gestalt number? Much higher.
Oh, for the presidential election, oh yes, much higher, like 80%,
Yeah, so
80, 90%.
instead of the 9% turnout, we had the 80% turnout in November. So that's always, this will not become a shock to anybody, but clearly citizen participation by participating in elections in a way that's convenient for them is really important for civic government, municipal government. I feel strongly about that. So there's nothing magic about November. So what you're telling me is to have a coordinated election, it works out usually, but not always, and sometimes you have to have two elections.
Exactly. So in other words, if we changed ours under 3110-109, which does require a vote, by the way, it still requires a vote.
Sure.
We'd have to have a ballot question, and the electorate would have to approve moving our regular election from April to November. The problem is they would approve moving it to the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. In most years, that's fine, but 2011 is a perfect example of when that wouldn't work. And depending on the leap year, it randomly changes. So.
And so all of the other cities in Colorado will not have an election that corresponds to any federal election that might have been held that year?
No, because everyone else has fixed the problem. There are very few statutory municipalities left to begin with. A lot of them are towns that have April elections and don't need to worry about this or have chosen not to worry about this. And all of the home rules have already had their charter elections to fix this.
But they changed them to the non-federal date.
Yes.
No, because they can have a charter election to amend their charter to,
Yes.
I assume.
But they
to
did
move
change them
the-
to you're right, because the federal date is the first Tuesday after the first Monday. Yes, you're
So
exactly right.
I'm confused about it. So
Well,
they
they
would
have-
have to have two elections.
They're going to have two elections if there's a federal election, yes. This is because Tabor was drafted poorly. We are stuck with Tabor.
I see.
But why
In
didn't
the
they change that part of Tabor as opposed to everybody changing their home rule things to the goofy date?
Because home rules are only allowed to have Tabor elections at their regular elections on the first Tuesday in November. So
Okay.
anyway, it's complicated, but Tabor dictates what everyone's doing with their November election date because it was poorly drafted. So that's why we're stuck with it. So that's what most do. So this is an issue taken care of in a home rule charter much more easily than it is just by having an election to move our election date to November. Because, for example, in 2011, that's just the first date I know of, but there's more of them. But if you look at November, the first Tuesday in November is November 1st in 2011. So.
But we'd be under home rule changing it to a date that doesn't match the feds.
Yes. Exactly.
And that's a good thing, huh?
And that's a discussion to have. That's a discussion you would have, obviously, if you had a home rule charter committee or commission. But
So if you, so you couldn't coordinate, you couldn't have part of the charter that says that you will have elections during the regularly scheduled federal elections.
you could, and then in years like 2011, you would not be able to have a Tabor election on the same day.
A Tabor election, a tax question.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's pretty bad.
Right.
So those few, so it would solve, right, it would solve
calendar looked like.
all of it, unless it just felt like you had to have a tax question that year,
Right.
and then you would have it during the wrong time.
Exactly.
The wrong Tuesday.
Yeah. So I think that this it basically solves all the issues, so
Yeah.
with the exception that most
Yeah.
times, I would say 99.99% cases, because you're not going to have a Tabor election if there's an election the next week, right? So you would coordinate it so that it would be during the regular federal election cycle.
Well, how many years does this happen?
It doesn't happen very often, but that's why 3110-109, the statute that allows statutory municipalities to move elections to November is quite rarely used because it's outdated now, so nobody uses it anymore. So that's why it's there. It does allow you to do this via an election, not a home rule election, just an election to change your date, your regular election date, but it's not used. There are very few statutory towns left that have any interest in moving their election to November. That's part of it, too.
Okay. So the take-home message here is to have, tell me one more time. I'm a simple guy, need simple answers, sometimes difficult.
I wish this was simpler. Wait, okay.
For the town to have elections during the federal election cycle can be, I'm sorry, it's just speaking to the mic, can be an individual election or is required to be home ruled? What does the state statute tell me?
I thought you said to coincide with federal, we should do it on our own. If we wanted to coincide with all the other communities, we can do home rule.
I want to understand this completely.
Okay. I'm just going to pull up. Okay, so.
And if it's, once again, if we need to delve into this in more detail, it might require, perhaps it would require a little synopsis in a
That may
memo.
be easier if I could put it in writing for you, but then I can lay out all the options and use 2011 as an example, perhaps, since we know that's the first year when this would come up.
Okay.
Why don't we put it on the next work session, just so we can
Sure, I'm happy
cover
to.
it, record it, make it available.
Okay.
I'd be happy to discuss it in more detail then.
Great. So, and perhaps CML could weigh in on
Yes.
Tabor and ask for their, I don't know how that part of Tabor could be changed to coordinate with the federal.
They won't.
Would that
Tabor's
be
never ever going to be. I mean, nobody's going to put. You need a statewide election.
Statewide election, but the legislature, CML could ask the legislature to put something on the ballot just to say, help us coordinate elections so they all make sense as opposed to having
I don't think they will
elections in
because they
November.
went the other way. All of the cities already changed all their charters to be the first Tuesday in November. So I doubt that because that's what CML recommended. So CML recommended that all the home rules change their charters to have elections on the first Tuesday in November.
And then pray the disconnect doesn't happen very often.
Yes. And so that's what they all did. So I can't, I'm not saying not to bring it up with CML, but I doubt now CML is going to reverse their position and say now that we had all of you home rule municipalities have charter amendment elections, which they all did, to amend their charters. I don't think CML is now going to reverse and say, oh, by the way, now we think you should go the other way. So that's my guess. I can't say that for certain.
Probably doesn't happen very often in a year or something. They must have looked.
Right, exactly.
This is, so the philosophy here about having a local constitution, also known as home rule, just in the global perspective, seems to make sense because you can cure most of these problems without having to have the state become involved in this, and you have citizens have much more local control over local issues. But I guess that's my little, that was my little soapbox. So, Mayor's done with the soapbox. Trustee D'Souza.
Hopefully a bit shorter than that. I got lost about halfway through
So
that.
when does the Supreme Court get appointed? Start this.
I attended a Dr. Cog meeting, a lengthy one, where with Fast Tracks is now underfunded by about $2.2 billion. Part of that is due to the shortfall in sales tax, and anytime that they want to revise their budget or plan, it has to go through Dr. Cog, and Dr. Cog felt that their new plan, as far as funding sources, the term actually agreed upon, I believe, was just plain optimistic, after we debated that for an hour. And part of that was because they estimate that they can bring in $1 billion in private sources on that one, and public-private partnerships, which, again, we're not sure of this economy that can happen. But rather than turn it down and stall things, we approved it with that caveat that we feel that their budget is not quite accurate. For our area, there was the redistribution of the ARA funds, and they call that the maintenance effort for Region 6, which we're in. One of the things is the Broomfield Lafayette concrete restoration on 287, and so those funds are going to go into that. And then also some of the different multimodal projects around Boulder, those funds will get redistributed to that. And also, Joe, they wanted to have a meeting, one-on-one meetings again, so I was asked to catch up on that. And one of the other things I was going to bring up, on your weekly digest about the Colton Trailhead and that's kind of stalled a little bit, was part of the reason, and I just want to be clear because I thought that we had sort of said that we were going to do recycled asphalt on that instead of actual paving, and I heard that that might be part of the problem with the holdup, that they're not sure. So I just wanted to double check with you if there was a miscommunication about that.
No. We've been clear that we were interested in using recycled road base for the parking lot. That's still an upgrade over what the county's typical finished parking area would be. But no, that's not the reason. I was contacted by Ron Stewart, the Director of Parks and Open Space for Boulder County, who indicated that because of a significant drop in the county's open space sales tax, in excess of 10%, that they were needing to scale back on some of their approved capital improvement projects for the current fiscal year. He assured me that we were at the top of the list to begin in early 2010, and then when he said the 10% was more than just a 10% hit, because the biggest outlay that they have is their debt service. So their capital projects might be getting hit more to the tune of 40 or 50%. But they're still committed to the project. We talked at length about the sequencing. There had also been some representations that there's a new trail going from Original Town all the way down to Colton, behind the ridge.
Right.
And that's being held up because of some negotiations with CDOT and FRICO to be able to cross some of the waterways. But again, not a reason to affect the trailhead. So, comment was made earlier tonight at Transportation and Safety. The trailhead will be built on time and at budget. Our target date for preliminary acceptance is September 15th and final acceptance September 30th. What you're going to see is a fully improved curbed access into a dirt lot.
Okay.
And that the dirt lot will then be improved sometime in early 2010. Most of the work is being done by Boulder County's in-house staff.
Okay.
And then we have up to a $100,000 contribution for upgrades, which will include the paving surface, which will include the restroom, probably kiosk, and maybe some bike racks, and things that would not typically be in a county installation, but we wanted to have at our trailhead.
So it's still going forward?
It's still going forward, but we've been making the representation that if the roundabout got completed on September 15th, you'd be seeing work immediately thereafter by Boulder County, and they're now telling us it's going to be early 2010 before they're going to start work over there.
Okay, thank you. And nothing else to report?
And there wasn't any co-construction at the trailhead and the roundabout that's being postponed. I mean, we don't want to do something it doesn't sound like it's the case. No, we don't want to have something where we're not going to construct something and I have to rip something out now because we can't construct it. That's not
absolutely not. The only thing that will happen over there, and this is another issue that we've had with Excel, not surprising after the experience we had with street lighting on Coal Creek, we were originally told that all the materials that we needed for the high-intensity, high Cobra-armed street lights were in stock. They then told us that they don't have it in stock, and it's going to be an 8-week lead to order the materials. We told them, even though we have not signed contracts, to go ahead and order the materials. There will be temporary lighting up when the roundabout is ready to be operational by September 15th. We're probably talking about 4 wooden poles with temporary light fixtures on it so that you're not driving blind around the roundabout. Those light fixtures are temporary and will be replaced. I would expect the full lighting to be done before the end of the year. And one of the contracts that you'll have, whether it's at the next meeting or later in September, will be the final contract with Excel saying here's the price. You'll recall that there was a $65,000 allowance within the $120,000 ad that we recently did with Boulder County.
I haven't turned 60 yet, but I forget where we are with signage.
Signage, there was no decision made, other than the fact that Boulder County said that they wouldn't pay for signage. We'll be coming back to you with some recommendation, or alternative recommendations for signage, whether we come up with a different way to install illuminated signs, or whether we treat the interchange, or the intersection, much like we do the 88th Street intersection, and how we sign it, which is reflectorized signs at various locations showing you where to go to 88th, where to go to Rock Creek.
Okay. So that will be in a month or two.
And that will be on our dime. That's something that Boulder County said that they would specifically not contribute towards. They are paying for the flashing pedestrian signals. At this point, we've only decided to install the conduit. We haven't made the decision whether to install the flashing pedestrian crossings, though they are prepared to pay for all of that work. We have instructed the contractor to install the conduit, and they are paying for the street lighting at a total cost of up to $120,000.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Gregoris.
Attended the Transportation and Safety Committee along with the trustees Cirelli and D'Souza, our town manager, our new Public Works Director, Sergeant Cullen, and who am I forgetting? Alex, right. The main outcome of that had to do with the Spear Elementary safety, to move the signage. It's too close to the stop sign on Indiana and El Dorado, so we're going to move it about 100 feet farther south, and then put a flashing light at a cost of $1,000, I believe. That should happen in the next couple of weeks. We all are in favor of that, so we wanted to bring it before the board. And then as a result of that, also Sergeant Cullen's suggestion was to include El Dorado on either side of Indiana as part of the school zone during that time, and some other signage to state that. I think that was the main...
Actually, I asked about the El Dorado when the person was here recommending it, and they said they didn't think they wanted to do that, but so the safety committee decided it wanted to. I suggested because I thought it made sense, but the person said no.
The idea is that if people come from El Dorado, theoretically, they might not know they were in a school zone as they turned.
That's why I suggested it. Okay, so fine.
Okay. Anything else? All right. With that, let's move to item number 8, which is a public hearing and approval of an ordinance to rezone Resolute property from Community Activity Center to Regional Activity Center. With that, I'd like to open the public hearing. Phyllis, you have proof of publication?
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Randall.
Very brief introduction. As the board is aware, the property that we're discussing this evening is located at the northwest corner of Colton and Flatiron Circle, which is bordered by the Horizon Apartment Complex on the north and the west, Colton on the south, and Flatiron's Mall on the east. The site that we're discussing tonight contains 13.6 acres. 12.8 acres of that is currently owned by Resolute Investments. 0.8 acres is owned by the town. That used to be the master parcel years ago. All of this area is governed by the Rock Creek Ranch Planned Unit Development. So if you were to look in Chapter 16 and look for the CAC or the RAC, you're not going to find it. It's all governed by the PUD for Rock Creek Ranch. Specifically, the applicant is requesting to rezone the property from CAC to RAC. This will allow specifically for an expanded list of potential uses. The most significant change allowed as a result of the change in underlying zoning is the maximum building height. It allows a building to go up to 70 feet tall, whereas the CAC only allows 40 feet. There is no other change in terms of maximum lot coverage. There are no changes in open space or parking requirements. This has been before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission recommended at one of their most recent meetings unanimous approval by those that were in attendance. Staff recommends your concurrence. Again, this is up for second read. It would be appropriate to solicit all public comment and then hopefully make a decision this evening. And Resolute is represented tonight by Mr. Chris Barnes, who's able to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. And I think that we had the technology solved, so I think for the viewing public and anybody else who is interested, could you describe where the project is and generally what, not the project, but the rezoning and things that you are potentially envisioning there, I guess, would be more accurate?
Sure. My name is Chris Barnes. Address is 7374 South Alton Way, Centennial, Colorado 80122. I'd like to thank the board for being here tonight to hear our proposal and thank staff for working on this proposal with us and getting us to this point. If you remember, we were here in February in a concept, I think they call it a concept study session, in which we presented the following plan. And just to go over that plan, it consisted of the property, Flatirons Mall is over in this corner, and Oxford Reservoir, and you've got all the residential, the Rock Creek residential around Bolton Road here and Flatiron Circle here. The plan consists of 2 offices of 75,000 square feet each, 2 retail buildings or restaurant that combine to be about 11,200 square feet, and then a proposed 60,135 room hotel. This is just a concept plan. This is a plan that could evolve from the change from the CAC to the RAC zoning. And I believe this was well received at the time in February because it addressed the density that the town was looking for, created jobs, and also from a financial standpoint, it benefited the town pretty greatly. So the reason to go from the CAC to the RAC is there's multiple reasons. The expanded uses, it allows for job centers and hotels. It allows for added height, 30 extra feet, which allows us to get more density on the site, which was one of the desires of the town. And the CAC zoning was more of a social and cultural focus, and the RAC zoning is more of a job employment focus. And with Conoco going about a mile from the front and back door, and with the Flatirons retail over here, we just feel that the RAC zoning is the highest and best use for this parcel. And by approving a rezone tonight, which I'm asking for, it would allow us to move forward in our development plan, a 3 to 5 year plan to get this site developed as something like this. Just to be sure, what you're approving tonight is not this plan. It's something that could be like this. We have to come before the board for each and every use that comes from here on out. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Trustee Skumatz?
How tall are the theaters that are, do you know about how tall the AMC theaters are in the mall? Just to get a sense of what 70 feet is.
I would estimate between 35 and 40 feet.
Thanks.
Don't hold me to that.
Any other questions? Then I just have a general question about timing. Obviously, we're just approving the change in zoning tonight. Do you have, the market is what the market is right now. It's probably not completely favorable, but do you have a generalized feeling about when we might see something occur on this site?
Well, we've had some preliminary interest from some hotel users. That being said, like you said, the market is really tough right now, and it's hard to nail down when we can find users and when people are going to want this square footage. But if I had to look into my crystal ball and give you a good idea of when I thought, it's probably in the 3 to 5 year range.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to say that ultimately, I think that's a great location for a hotel. There's so much going on around that area, so when the time comes to build it, I think it'll be very successful.
I agree.
Especially when there's a lodging tax. Oh, sorry.
And just on that note, City of Centennial just went to home rule, so you might check with them on how they did it, the process they went through. They just recently went that way, so it might be a good model.
Okay, thanks.
Couple points I would Couple points I would remind the board. First of all, when you first met with Resolute almost 2 years ago, they were interested in the property. They had an option on the property. They've since acquired it. So we're not talking about a prospective developer. We're talking about an investor. They own the land. The second is the guidance that the board has given staff on this particular site was maximize its development potential. So that's why we were comfortable, and when you met with Resolute back in February, they gave you a checklist of things that they were looking to do, and the board kind of gave the head nod that rezoning they were comfortable with, recognizing that the specifics of the plan, whether the 2 offices and the hotel turn out to be 2 hotels and an office, the mixture could change, but it does maximize the density, and it diversifies the density, both of which seem to have been very, very strong board goals. So that's why we've taken them and given them the encouragement to proceed to the steps that they have so far.
Great, thanks. Would like to entertain any public comment about this. questions? Any more board questions? Okay, gavel is coming. I'd like to close the public hearing. Any comments about this particular site from anybody?
I see no problem with going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, Planning Commission was in favor of it, and since it's sort of butting right up against Broomfield, all the development there, I think maximizing development is the thing to do that in that site.
I guess my only comment, I agree with all of those comments as well. Normally, we don't rezone without having more details in place. I think that we're generally pretty comfortable with this, no matter, within this realm of possibilities. And so, while I typically wouldn't recommend rezoning without having something more definite, I think this would be, it's completely reasonable to do that in this particular circumstance. Other comments?
No, I was just going to say, I agree again with what the other trustees have said, and I think, especially considering across the street is so many fast food restaurants and things like that, this is a good use for that property. Just to pass on a request I had from several middle schoolers, they'd love to have a Dave & Buster's go in there.
Nameless middle schoolers?
Take that under advisement.
Nameless Buster's.
All right, great. Unless there's any more comments about this, I'd entertain a motion by Trustee Skumatz.
Thank you. I'd like to move Town of Superior Ordinance Number 0-11, Series 2009, an ordinance of the Board of the Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an amendment to the Rock Creek Branch Planned Unit Development to rezone lots 1 and 2 of Block 1, Rock Creek Branch Filing Number 117B, the Horizons at Rock Creek Development, from Community Activity Center zoning to Regional Activity Center zoning in case number RCR-PUDA/-2009-1.
Motion by Trustee Skumatz. Is there a second? By Trustee D'Souza. Further comment? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to the Dave & Buster's and 2 hotels. All right. With that, we're nearing the end of our meeting. Is there anything else to come before the board this evening? Okay, seeing none. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.